Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show. With us, your in-house provocateur, David Volcher, calling in all the way from Fontainebleau, and me, your friendly neighborhood jeweler, Armin Joseph, dialing in from my beloved Amsterdam. Today, we're very honored and proud to welcome in the virtual studio the co-founder of the epic watch brand, Armin Strom. We have dear Claude Greisler in the studio. Welcome, Claude.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure and honor is all ours. And since you guys proudly emphasize that you're Swiss-German, Guten Tag, Willkommen, we're very happy to have you here.
Dankeschön.
Bitteschön. Claude, I am a huge admirer of both you as a master watchmaker and also the brand. You guys are very modest by saying that you are only 15 years old, but it's a bit longer because you're 15 years now celebrating the manufacture. I believe 3 years before, Serge, Michel, and you took over the company from Mr. Armin Strom. Please walk us through that history, and I'll sit back with my coffee and enjoy the ride.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Yes, as you mentioned, the whole history started a few years earlier. That was actually 1978, where myself and Serge were both born in Burgdorf. Burgdorf is a small city near Bern, near the capital of Switzerland. It's also called the door of the Emmental, and the Emmental is very known for its cheese with the big holes. Armin Strom was his jewelry shop was in Burgdorf, and Armin Strom was selling watches in Burgdorf, in the old town of Burgdorf. He was famous in our village because he was not only selling watches, he also started to launch his own brand. So he did these hand-skeletonized watches and delivered them worldwide. And he was driving a Jaguar E-Type. And if you imagine driving a red Jaguar E-Type in a village where you have more cows than people living, so somehow Mr. Armin Strom was present for me and Sir since we are a child, because he was a very famous person in our village. And this is how we first got in touch with Mr. Armin Strom. And so everything started very early in 2006. Finally, Serge and his father decided to take over our local heritage of watchmaking, the brand Mr. Armin from Mr. Armin Strom. And I joined 2 years later. I joined Serge and Mr. Armin Strom here in Biel to actually build up the manufactory for the brand. Back then I was working with Christophe Claude in Le Locle, and had the opportunity to work with Christophe for mainly in movement development. But I also had the chance to, if you do, Claude at that time was a small company. I think we were 65 people working there. And so even as a young engineer, you had the chance to talk to the mechanics. And, I was seeing how Claude grew as a manufacturer, which gave me the opportunity, to actually be able to build up a manufactory for Armin Strom here in Biel. And this is how we started the brand. Actually, in 2000, we started the brand. The brand was started by Mr. Armin Strom with a clear philosophy of hand-skeletonized watches. And Armin Strom told me that, for him, when he started to create his brand, he was very obvious that the movement should not be covered with a dial, that the movement should be visible from the front and from the back side. So, and this was his philosophy. This is why he was strongly believing in mechanical movements, even in the period of time in the 80s, where the quartz movement came on the market, and everybody was believing that the mechanical movement will be dying. And he was so much believing, due to his experience in watch restoration, due to his experience as a master watchmaker, that there is still room to believe and strongly believe in the art of mechanical watches. And this motivation of, highlighting the movement, having the movement visible, never covered with a dial, is what Serge, as a watch collector, and myself as a watchmaker, was making us believing that there is room to create a brand, Armin Strom.
One thing I found interesting as I was researching the interview and as I was listening to you was that I actually did not know that one of the founding values was the skeletonization of the movement. I mean, clearly celebration of mechanical movements is obvious in everything you do. But skeletonization, that's not something that I knew. And I know we're going to talk about it, but when I think Armin Strom, I think resonance. And so maybe this is a bit of a, hopefully not too early of a lead in, but it seems like you've obviously done a lot of things since that original idea to found this. How much do you think that you have stayed true to some of those founding values, and how much do you think you've just adapted and changed your mission over time since then?
I think the mission has strongly changed. In 2009, when we took over, 2006, Serge was taking over the brand from Mr. Armin Strom. I joined in 2008. And we were asking ourselves, how could we create a brand? Where do we buy the movements from? How should the watches look like? So there was many questions. We strongly believed in this philosophy of having a transparent mechanic watch brand, but design, Armin Strom was a very vintage design. Serge and myself, we were 29 years old, so we were, thinking about having maybe something much more modern. And there was no movement supplier around which could deliver the quality which we expected from a watch movement. That was in 2009. Things has changed since 2009, but in 2009 it was extremely difficult to get high-end watch movements for without investing in a tourbillon or in a minute repeater, or there was Claude, there was Renault Papy, there was a B&B concept, but all those micro manufacturers, they were focused on the very high end section of mechanical movement. And we said, to just a standard movement, we were believing that ETA or sub-broad would not be the right approach to create the brand. And we decided then in 2009 to become a movement manufacturer. It was a need for us to create our own movements, to be able to give the brand its modern philosophy of innovating transparent mechanic. And this is how the journey in 2009 started. And we started with a very, we started from scratch. So Mr. Armin Strom, he bought movements, vintage movements. He disassembled them, he hand skeletonized them, and he reassembled them. And Serge and I, we started from scratch with 29 years old, starting to manufacturing our screws, our main plates, our bridges, to decoration in-house, to galvanic platements in-house, assembling. So it was quite a challenging a start with Armin Strom.
When you mention those dates, one thing that I can't help thinking of is this obviously was the last kind of big financial crisis. If you could just kind of tell us what was going through your mind at the time, because it seems like a big risk. And I'm thinking maybe you were able to get some preferential treatment from some suppliers because they just didn't have any business coming in from elsewhere. And so they were happy to take a chance on some younger professionals. I mean, how did that happen at such a difficult time?
Actually, it was we could convince Serge's father to invest in the manufactory just before the crisis came. And And actually the crisis plate was even helpful for us because, as you mentioned, I mean, I think the guy who sold me the milling machine offered me the wire erosion machine if I would take the milling machine from its company. So we had, to invest in a new building, to invest in machineries, to invest in software, and it was just a perfect timing because everybody was like looking for new clients who were well treated. A completely different situation than the last 2 years. So the last 2 years, if you approach somebody who's doing CNC machines, they will tell you that, oh, no, waiting time is 12 to 16 months. And they treat you badly because they don't need you as a small manufacturer. But in 2009, when we created this new, our factory, you were treated like a hero from those machine suppliers, or even, everybody was like totally amazed that a young company is building up in a crisis, a watch factory. And that was extremely, extremely helpful. Also, hiring people. I mean, everybody was looking for jobs. It was very easy to hire people. If I hire today, if I'm looking for a watchmaker, I'm more than happy to find. If I find one, we're going to train them in-house to make sure that they are able to work with us. Back in those days, 2009, I had like 10 or 12 watchmakers applying for one single job. So it was a chance to build up the factory in 2009.
And I have just one more question amongst the many I think we could ask you is, okay, so you've got a partner, an idea, a factory, but you need customers. And I think it's one thing to keep getting customers when you're an established brand. It's another one to get new customers, especially when you're selling something so high end with according price points as what Armin Strom was doing. So could you maybe just on a high level walk us through what the strategy was and how are you able to gain that initial momentum?
But we were lucky that Mr. Armin Strom was famous for hand skeletonized watches. He was the only independent watchmaker working for Omega, and Mr. Armin Strom was known in the Omega community. Mr. Armin Strom was well known because he skeletonized a few Omega wristwatches. And so this opened up a few doors at the beginning. So Armin Strom was not unknown. He was quite famous in Italy. So his only little weakness was that he was not English speaking and he was not French speaking. So Mr. Armin Strom was Italian and German speaking. So he had quite a good dealer relationship in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Italy. But to start, that was not a huge network, but there was a little network which allowed us to, easily get in contact with the retailers. And, that was a easy, not an easy start, but it was, we didn't start it from scratch with the distribution and with the, finding collectors. He was known. So,
and going from 2006, Serge taking over, 2008, you joining the company, you had a clear-cut DNA for the brand that it's no dials, a lot of skeletonization. For me, also a design element always has been I call it the lip at 6 o'clock. So in between the lugs, the engraving plate. I don't know what the official name is for that, Claude.
It's the lip. Yeah, we call it the lip.
The lip, yeah. Okay. Or you could call it the tongue sticking out of you.
Yeah.
You guys are, to my satisfaction now, reducing it to less and less as a design element. Now, when you guys started, did you set from the start that you need to be an haute horlogerie brand? Because you guys, in my humble opinion, you're not unknown and you're not unfamiliar, but there's today still a small group of connoisseurs that know Armin Strom, and there's a lot of discovering. So, and you made your life very difficult by setting the bar so high, because you guys definitely have autology. Now, how I summarize Armin Strom to collectors, it gives me that old IWC technical vibes, clean-cut designs, highly technical, no BS. What you see is what you get, pure quality, technical, clean designs. That's how I summarize it. Did you guys set that out 15 years ago? Or did it evolve?
I think it evolved over the last 15 years. I mean, quality, engineering, innovation was always extremely important for us because, just doing another watch movement, that never belonged to our philosophy. We always wanted to improve things, just doing a movement to be able to say that we have our own movement. That was never what we wanted to have the brand stand for. So very easy. The very first watch we launched, we had a power reserve of 8 days, and we had the winding system on the dial side with the 1 week to give it, 8 days is a long power reserve, so it's a long way to wind up. So we wanted to create an animation on the dial side. And so there was always, we wanted to be a little bit more clever than standard movements, and we wanted to innovate if it comes to watchmaking, because my background is watch restoration. And when you see what was done in the past and how creative the watchmaker were, if you go to pocket watches, if you go to first wrist watches, there were so many things were done, and watchmakers experienced with complications or doing things differently. And then in the 90s, where the big crisis war, every single watch movement looked almost the same. It's a barrel, gear train, an escapement, one balance wheel, maybe a rotor, maybe a date indication or a chronograph. But every movement, it sometimes, I personally think it gets a little bit boring if it comes to the watch movement. So we said in Armin Strom, we have to offer things which are different and things which make the movement or innovation, which makes the watch movement either more reliable or just better in timekeeping. And this is thanks to the CNC production, thanks to the software we use to develop new watch movement. There's so much improvement which can be made in the watch movement that this became part of that. Form follows function. I think this is the when you have the movement taking part of the design, and the movement is not open work. For me, an open worked movement is something where you have a movement which is not supposed to be highlighted, and then you just open work it to be highlighted. But in Armin Strom, we highlight what we do. We highlight the most important part of a watch. It's always visible and takes part of the design. And it's a very industrial way of, this is maybe where this industrial look comes from.
If I counted correctly on arminstrom.com, there are 24 caliber references displayed there. And if I analyze it correctly, there's 17 in-house base calibers. If that's correct, Claude, that's bizarre to have that created in 15 years. Me as an entrepreneur, I can't even see how that commercially is viable. I almost want to ask you guys, are you krank? Or, correct my French, David, malade? How did you guys do that?
When I started to build up the factory, the manufacture, I have done so many developments for other brands, and I always started from scratch to create a new movement. You get a diameter, you get a height, you get functions, and then you start to develop a movement. But in Armin Strom, I was more inspired or impressed by how the automotive world works. and they share so many components in between the different cars. And this is exactly what I applied in Armin Strom. We have a lot of different calibers, but the winding system, the gear train, the escapement, the balance wheels, always we use the same components or almost the same components for all different calibers, which is an advantage because we can improve. If I do an improvement for the winding stem or the way how the hands will be set, all the calibers take benefit of the modification. If I do a better gear train because we have reworked the gears, every single caliber will get the upgrade at the same time. And this is so it's not 17 different calibers. I've used them, the components, and then combined them in a different way and added or removed functions out from it. So it's a very contemporary way of building and creating watch movements. But that's maybe something, if you do everything in-house and you design, development, manufacturing, decoration, and everything is in-house, then you can start to optimize small little details. If you are a watch brand and you have like several partners which you work for, so you cannot share a gear train in between one company to the other company, because if some of our friends, which also do work in this so-called independent world, they have several movement suppliers. So the balance wheels belongs to one movement supplier, the other one has another balance wheel. So in their collection, they don't have a clear line. And this is in Armin Strom, this is completely different. The Tribute one and the Resonance, they have the same balance wheel. So if I do a better balance wheel, or I see how I can improve thanks to the experience we gained in Resonance, the Tribute one will become at the same time even better. And this is that's the secret behind our high number of movements. Maybe we had even more movements than dial colors in the past.
That's crazy. Now that I've been listening to you, I have a question that I'm begging to ask you as a master watchmaker. There is no clear-cut definition in the watchmaking industry for the term manufacture. What is your definition, dear Claude? And two, how much % of your production is actually in-house, if you could share?
I can just say we're very transparent with what we do in-house and what we supply. So, but first, to your question, manufacture I think there is no manufacture comes from it's handmade. What is handmade? I mean, even handmade watches, if you go to, that's again, my background is watch restoration and I collect vintage watch tools. So watchmakers always use, first of all, they always use tools to create a watch movement. Today, the movements, the tools or the machines we use, they're CNC driven. They're way more complex than the hand driven tools back in the days, but they were always machines doing the parts. And the word manufacture comes from, being decorated, being assembled, being made in-house. For my understanding, a manufacturer should be somebody who is able to buy brass and steel and make a watch out of it with his ideas. It doesn't matter which kind of machines he is using, if he does the what kind of finishing he's applying, but if somebody is able to create with some raw material a final product, I think for me this is what a manufacturer stands for. If you buy a piece of leather and you do a handbag, then you are a manufacturer. But if you have somebody delivering you the parts of the handbag and then you just do assembled it in-house, for me, that's not a manufacturer. So that's the same in the watch industry. So it should be, but there's no rule, there's no controlled, no, in the cheese, my side business is cheese. So I have a cheese store in the Bernese Alps together with my wife. And then in the cheese business, they are very strict what kind of term you can use because they have this appellation d'origine contrôlée. So that means if you say you're a cheese factorer, you have to prove that you're a cheese factorer. They have strict rules of how it has to be done. But in the watch industry, it doesn't really exist. So actually everybody can say I'm a manufacturer.
Do you think that the Swiss watchmaking industry should regulate that more? Whereas the Swiss-made label, in my humble opinion, is too weak. 60% of cost and assembly should be done in Switzerland, and you can put a label Swiss-made on it. I assume Armin Strom is 100% Swiss-made.
Yes.
So you guys are way above that. Would you, I think an unwritten law is that if you do 80% if you design the calibers, produce the spare parts for about 80% and assemble it, that is usually the going rate for manufacture in the watchmaking business. But do you think it should be regulated more?
It's very difficult, I think. It's very difficult to now regulate a term which is very old and used by so many companies. I don't know. With thanks to social media, we are so transparent. You can go to a website. You can really, if the companies do their work in-house, they are so proud that they're going to explain how they do it. If some people do hide certain production steps, that means that they are maybe not 100% in-house. So for me, thanks to social media, thanks to people visiting the factory, thanks to the community, it's very transparent. Maybe for somebody who is new, I guess, yes, it could be helpful. But as soon as you are a little bit into watches, I think you are very, very aware of who is doing what and if they do in-house, if they do not in-house, what do they do in-house. I mean, some of them, they're maybe not under control of the fabrication, but they do the finishing and the assembling in-house. So
I'm definitely going to remember your definition of a manufacturer. I think that's a deceptively simple definition. So I'm going to file that one away. But what I want to do is tie a couple of things that we've talked about together. So we've spoken about launching during or around the financial crisis. We've talked about in-house and how that provides some production efficiencies. So now let's talk about the flip side. So if 2008, 2009 was awful, 2020 to 2023 was a rocket ship. And I want to explore that a little more because there's different aspects we can talk about. But I think I just want to start with, what was that experience like for Armin Strom and how did you manage that?
Oh, that was, as you mentioned, the last 2.5, 3 years, they were just crazy how the demand in independent watches increased. I remember during Corona, we were celebrating every single watch we sold at the beginning of Corona because it was tough. The retailers were closed, everybody was in a bad, the mood was quite bad at the beginning. So we were not sure if a luxury product still can be sold in such a crisis. And so actually, if somebody called, it was like we almost opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate that there's still people buying watches. And then just a few months later, the phone started to ring and people were asking about our watches, and the demand just increased in a way which we have never seen it before. And that was quite challenging because we were used to, if we did a series of 25 watches, we were very conservative and we said like, okay, let's maybe produce 15 and out of 25, and then we can still, do the last 10 watches once we sold the first 15. And in a short period of time, you do 25 and you get 110 or 150 orders. And then you have to start to, allocate watches. And so a completely different challenge. And at the same time, to increase the capacity of a company, even if you do everything in-house, it's not easy. First of all, space. We are very limited in space. We have to find new workshops to invest in more CNC machines to be able to produce more parts. Then hand decoration. We had to split up the workshop. We had to hire more people. So it was actually I remember, I think in 2019, when we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the factory, I was talking to my wife and I said, that was quite an intense time to build up a factory from scratch. And I'm not sure if I would still have the same energy to build up, to do it one more time. And I think what we did in the last 3 years, this was like we rebuilt the whole company to make sure that we can, that we are able to produce more watches than we could ever imagine, I think.
And as a follow-up, I think we've talked about this on the show, Alan, Rob, and I. My personal hypothesis is that I think that the watch industry, after having such expansion, is going to contract. And what's interesting is that a lot of this contraction seems to be happening on what we call hype watches. Now, obviously, Armin Strom shares the same price point, but it is not a hype watch. And so there's different ways I could go with this question. But my first one would be, how do you see the market evolving in the next 18 to 24 months? And how do you think that Armin Strom's trajectory might differ as a very technical manufacturer versus a brand who's selling watches that might be popular to show off on Instagram, if you see where I'm going with this? I mean, yeah, if you could just walk us through your projections and how you see your own brand evolving within that projection.
That's a very good question. First of all, I think we also have to see that many ingredients in the watch industry has changed over the last few years. First of all, secondary market became extremely, maybe overpriced, but there is a secondary market which is very transparent. So for me, one of a key element, what has changed the whole industry in the last few years is that if you buy a watch today, it's not an investment which is gone. It's really, you can trade watches. And this is an extremely important part today of buying watches, because in the past was like, especially here in Europe, the mentality was, okay, I buy a watch and I'm gonna inherit it to my son or to my, I buy it, I keep it, I put it in the safe, and, the money is gone. And because I got some extra money, I can do myself a favor and buy a watch. And today it's not the money is not gone, Even if you're young, if you're 25, you want to have a watch, you buy a watch. If you 2 years or 3 years or 4 years later, you want to buy your first apartment or house, you can still trade the watch and make money out of it. For me, that's a key reason. I remember Jean-Claude Biver once said that the iWatch will bring watches back to the Apple Watch and the whole Garmin Sunto watches will bring back watches to the wrist. And that's definitely a fact that people are wearing watches. Watches are CO2 neutral. That means, buying expensive cars is maybe not what the younger generation is looking for. And so watches are hype. Social media is a place to share the passion, is a place to present. But in general, I think watches is wearing watches, or the way how people are buying watches is completely different to 3 or 4 years ago. And this is making us believing that there will be more watches sold than before. Maybe a bit overhyped in the last 2 years, were overhyped, maybe a bit, I don't know, maybe some brands, some parts of our industry, the retail business was a bit over ambitious, but this is known in the watch industry. The watch industry is either extremely over ambitioned and everybody is happy and selling way more that they can produce, or it's a crisis. And, if I talk to my suppliers, it's always like, I have no room. I don't want to deliver small quantities, or a few months later, they call me up and say, can you please send us some orders for cases and hands? Even if you need small series, not an issue. And our watch industry is always up and down. The industry, not the consumer. It's just that the industry does react differently, or not. The industry never learned to react to the demand of the end consumer.
So that is an excellent segue into a detailed input question that I have for you. So I've worked in America a long time, and when things go down, the answer is layoffs. Now, you had mentioned in the financial crisis, dozens of watchmakers for openings, and now you just can't find them. I think my understanding is that is maybe the largest constraint to growing production. So could you speak specifically, and this is going to be interesting because your perspective is that of a watchmaker. So what is it like finding and training watchmakers to work at a high-level manufacturer such as Armin Strom's?
We are based in Biel. Biel is a city where we have, I think, round about 125 watch companies which are based in Biel. We have the biggest company is Rolex with their movement production here in Biel. We have Omega, and then we have several small brands. So that means from the whole area here in Biel, we have 2 watchmaker schools. We have one in Biel, one in Grenchen, and one in Rolex. So watchmaking, Biel is a watchmaking city. And that's also the reason why we were building up the manufactory in Biel or in Bienne and not in Bern, because Bern, we saw that there was just no watchmakers were around. There was no knowledge. There was no people getting trained in the business. And now it's the advantage in our area. I would say we are one of very few high-end watch companies. There are most of them are more in the industrial production range, and for young watchmakers who strongly believe in the high-end watchmaking and they want to learn more about hand decoration, hand finishing, assembling of high-end watches, complications, there are still people applying to us, and it's a lot of mouse to mouse, people who work in Armin Strom and they have friends and share the same passion, and there's not many offers here. There's more offers maybe in the French part, like even if they are close, like Neuchâtel or La Chaux-de-Fonds, Le Loc. But here in Biel, there's not many companies offering that type of watchmaking. And company is very young, dynamic. It's, we speak English, French, and German. And we have a lot of watchmakers from, I think we have 2 watchmakers from Denmark. Now we have 2 from Finland. We have 2 from Sweden. We have 1 from Belgium. We have 1 from Italy. And Biel is a very international, multicultural city. And this is very helpful for us to hire people, because you are not in a small village up in the Jura where the young, 20, 22, 24, 25 years old watchmakers find it boring to live up there. Biel is cool. Biel, you have a lake. There's a lot of things going on in the city, and it's a cool place to work. So
fantastic pitch. You make me want to go work for you. That was excellent.
For our listeners that are not that familiar with Armin Strom, could you tell us a bit about the price ranges? And then I want to talk about the collection. And a little bird told me that what I've seen on your beautiful boat on Lake Geneva, August 23, which was a stunning limited edition, which was a tribute to the 1 week, which you guys called the first edition. And I believe we're going to see a continuation of that chapter. This episode will air after Watches and Wonders. So if you could take that story into that story, please.
Okay. Maybe first the 1 week. The 1 week is our very first in-house caliber was called the 1 week, launched in 2009. Double barrel, power reserve indication, small second, off-center hour and minute hand. And the new version, which we, as you mentioned, we launched in August during Geneva Watches Days, was so-called the first edition. The first edition is always limited to 25 pieces because it's the first batch, which is be released by the company. It's got a completely redesigned movement. It's still a double barrel. It has centered hands. It's the very first time we have centered hands. The reason why is it's in a stainless steel case with a stainless steel bracelet. So a sports dedicated watch, and to have centered hands just felt right on the watch. The watch is way more balanced because in Armin Strom we are very known for our off-center dials. And the cool thing, for me, the coolest feature in this watch is the power reserve indication, because it's not a boring hand, indicating like how much power is left on a segment somewhere printed on your dial. No, it's it's the very first fully integrated power reserve indication into the movement. So if you have a closer look on our website, there's above the small second, the round about 11 o'clock, there is a skeletonized cone. It's like a 3-dimensional segment who indicates the power reserve thanks to a point on so there is a hole in the mail plate, and if you see the hole and to see the indicator which is behind it, so you can read the power reserve indicator. And it's, if you know, that's the idea of this power reserve indicator. It's a power reserve indication which you can, if you know where it is, it indicates you the power reserve, but it's not something which is very obvious on your movement. We want to have people taking their time to explore the beauty of this hand finished parts, and to, give the owner of the watch the opportunity to check the power reserve indication. And it's driven by a cone system, which is just below the small second hand, and it's well balanced, and it's a very cool future. You can really we want to people take their time, enjoy the beauty of the hand finished parts, which also indicates them the power reserve indication. And I think that for me, it's a bit the future of watchmaking. It's not being obvious and, just having things printed on the dial to indicate things. No, it's more the way how it's built in the movement, the way how you can explore it, the way how you can share it with people you want to share it. That's the coolness of mechanical watchmaking.
Would you just give us an intro to the rest of the collection and linking it also to pricing? So our customers our listeners, you see, I have my retail hat suddenly on. So what we're talking about level wise.
Okay, so we have in Armin Strom we have 3 collections. We have so-called the System 78. We have the Resonance collection, and we have the Masterpiece collection. Price range of the System 78 is below 20,000, round about 18,000 for the Tribute 1, up to 35,000 for the Orbit. Orbit is a sports watch, ceramic bezel with a pointed date, with the on-off function driven by a column wheel, so very technical. And I think we could do a podcast just talking about how cool it is to have a column wheel driving a date indication. But then in Resonance, we have, for now, we have one product, the mirrored force resonance, which is around about 70,000 Swiss. And Masterpiece Collection is in a price range of 180,000 to 380,000. But the Masterpiece Collection is very limited. So we only produce 2, maximum 3 masterpieces a year. So that's a very limited production. We have the first ever built Resonance minute repeater, which is a watch which is very time-taking in decoration and assembling. So therefore, we only produce 2 a year, and we have the dual time, which is this oval-shaped watch. And there we are almost running out of also that is everything is sold now. So I think there's 1 or 2 watches left. But the most important collection for us is definitely Resonance, because Resonance is our signature complication, and it's became an extremely important collection for Armin Strom.
And the listeners that listened for quite some time to the Real Time Show know that I'm a huge fan of Resonance. We've actually discussed Armin Strom in previous episodes, and we promised them to get you on the show. It took some while due to us getting a microphone to you, not to you, because you guys were very helpful. So thank you for that. I would actually love to invite you back on and do one masterclass about Resonance, if you're willing, Claude, because we're running out of time and I have a zillion more questions, and I know David has too.
Resonance, it would be an absolute pleasure to do a masterclass on Resonance. And just to give you an idea, that the reason why we expand the company is not only because we want to provide more watches, it's also to give us more space and freedom to create more exciting watches. And just to make people curious about the next episode, it's just Resonance. I still believe that we are very at the beginning. We have seen so much advantages by using Resonance that we have so many ideas, and this is what makes me wake up every morning and enjoying to go to work, because I know that there's so many great movements in our pipeline, and Resonance is one of the best ever complication, because the potential is so huge that it's But let's talk more in detail maybe on the next episode.
Hereby confirmed, we have a new date. We're leaving the microphone, the TRTS microphone, with you guys in Biel. Now, you've heard it on the show, guys, the most exciting complications. Not me saying it. It's a legend in the watchmaking industry. You heard it here on TRTS. Now, Claude, you didn't forget about the ladies, so you guys also dedicate attention to the ladies. Looking at price elasticity of the brand, would you envision that you will make, I call it, more accessible price points, or do you think that the future for Armin Strom lies in the ultra complications, and that obviously has a different price tag?
No, the collection System 78 I think we offer a very good quality for what the watch offers. It's still a lot of money. I fully agree that 18,000 or 20,000, 21,000, up to 30,000 is a lot of money for a watch. But what we offer, and in the way how we offer hand finishings and innovation and transparent mechanic, I think it's a very cool offer. And it's called System 78 because myself and Serge were both born 1978. And the of course, Resonance is the signature collection, but the collection 78 is very important to us because Serge, as a watch collector, and me as a watchmaker, we strongly believe that there's a lot of room for this collection. And the collection also gets a lot of attention because we know that not everybody can offer himself a Resonance. A Resonance is more complicated to do. There is more parts involved. It is on a higher price level. But System 78 benefits a lot of our, as I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about the calibers, actually, there is a small resonance, even if there are not two balance wheels in every watch of System 78, because they share so much components in between them. So every watch in System 78 is taking benefit in what happens in Resonant. So, and it's just a more reasonable price range, maybe first of all, and it's also more classic because we use one or two barrels, one gear train, one escapement, and one balance wheel, which makes setting up the watch, assembling, decoration, everything a bit more easy because there are less parts involved. But there's still a lot of innovation. If it comes to System 78, equal force barrel, the first ever built Maltese cross combined with a micro rotor. In the Tribute one, we have the motor barrel, 38 millimeters, 100 hours of power reserve. So there is the innovation and the motivation and the precision of Resonance is, let's say, that's the small System 78 is like the small brother of the Resonance collection.
If you daydream, what complication should one day be incorporated into Armin Strom calibers or watches that you create?
Honestly, Resonance is already a dream came through because when I graduated in watch restoration, I had the chance to work on a double pendulum clock. And so Resonance, to me, to have a breakthrough in Resonance when it comes to wristwatch, that was already something which I couldn't imagine myself as a young engineer. It just by chance, by discovering a few things, to have such a complication which is as phenomenal as the Resonance. I think it's very difficult to do it twice, because it's such a breakthrough, I would say. But there's one unsolved problem in the watch industry, and now becomes a little bit difficult. If you have a balance wheel, we are focusing different positions on a movement. So we have the flat positions and we have the vertical positions. And so the impact of gravity and friction is different if you have a balance wheel turning horizontally or vertically. And this is a problem which still did not get solved in a wristwatch to find a way to compensate the positions. You can build a watch inserted or a balance wheel like Grupo Force at 30 degrees, but it's not completely solved. It just depends on how you measure, but you always find the balance wheel somehow on a flat or on a vertically position. And I think this is one of the unsolved problem. It's very nerdy and technically, but I think there is room to solve this problem, which means you would have a wristwatch and it doesn't matter which position you wear the watch, you always get the same friction of your on your balance wheels. And that will be for me, that will be my grail watch, I think.
David, did you get schooled?
I think I now have a master's, a podcast master's in watchmaking, thanks to that.
Are you ready for your PhD?
Oof. I don't know. That depends if Armin Strom's kind enough to come back and give us some more masterclass talks like that.
Well, we already confirmed at least one. I'm going to twist Claude's arm, Serge's arm, Sonia, their wonderful communication manager, to come back on. I've enjoyed it. Claude, thank you so much. Vielen Dank. It was amazing. My expectations were very high. You did not match them, but surpassed them. I really appreciate it. I know you have guests from Asia, so you need to run to the manufacturing facilities. Thank you. And we can't wait for the next episode.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to talk about Armin Strom. I'm looking forward to do a few more resonance and technical podcasts.
So do we. So dear listeners, if you have any questions for Serge and or Armin Strom as a team, hit us up, message us, and we'll make sure we'll deal with them in future recordings with the Armin Strom team. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. You can find all our previous episodes on our official website, www.therealtime.show. You can find us on Instagram using the handle @therealtime.show. If you want to support this show, please subscribe, like, rate, and do share it with your friends. If you have any questions, feedback, and or criticism, please do send us a message. You can also DM us if you want to join our TRTS community on WhatsApp. You can reach David via Instagram using his handle @DAVAUCHER. Rob you can find @ROBNUDDS and me @ALONBENJOS. If you prefer to send us an old school email, you can just add our first name to @therealtime.show, like our Instagram handle. Stay sane and keep on ticking.